Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, welcome to the monthly training webinar. Today, we're going to talk about agency administrator and data quality. Okay. So the agenda for today, agency administrator, we're going to talk about first about the agency administrator role and their main responsibilities. Then we're going to talk about monitoring data quality, which includes the concept of data quality, the components of data quality. After this, we're going to review the common data quality issues. And finally, we're going to talk about the data quality report cards. Okay, so let's start with the agency administrator role. So who is the agency administrator? In a nutshell, the agency administrator is the person or the persons who oversee and manages the data of your agency, the data that your agency enters into HMIS. And also is the contact between your agency and us, the HMIS department. So you are like the bridge between us and your agency. Can I please ask everybody to unmute themselves? I'm hearing a feedback from someone. Can you please unmute yourselves? Okay, thank you. Okay, one important thing to consider about the agency administrator role is that you don't have to be in a leadership position to be an agency administrator. So I know the word administrator could indicate that, but that's not necessarily the case. So basically, the agency administrator can be any HMIS user that can provide technical support and assistance to the rest of the users in a reliable way and be informed of all the HMIS updates and shares them with the agency. Okay. So let's review the main responsibilities that you have as agency administrator. So your first responsibility is to manage the rest of the users at your agency. So this means that you would be responsible for identifying the users who need access to HMIS, as well as informing the help desk when a new user completes training, and providing further training to these users when it's needed. So you should also notify the help desk when a user no longer needs access to HMIS, so we can go ahead and deactivate their accounts. So this is not part of your responsibility per se, but I think it's important to remember that when there are changes in the agency administrator assignation, the executive directors should submit the contact information of the new agency administrators to us. So in that way, we can be aware of these changes. So as an agency administrator, you're also in charge of the communication related to HMIS. So this would include sharing important HMIS news with all your users, updating users on topics discussed at data meetings or user meetings, and making sure users are getting our emails and messages correctly. Another very important responsibility that you have as the agency administrator is to provide technical support to all your users. So you should answer all the technical support questions that your users might have. And in case you cannot resolve them, then you should escalate these issues with us by entering a ticket to the help desk. It's important to remember your users that only the agency administrator should submit tickets. So please keep that in mind and remind them of that. Okay, so talking about technical support, I would like to give you some tips for entering effective tickets to the help desk. So first, provide as much details as possible so we can recreate the issue that you are having on our end. Another thing, you already know this, but please do not include personal identifying information. Always refers to clients by client ID. And Screenshots are great. I actually love screenshots personally, but just make sure that when you include any screenshot in your ticket, that it doesn't include any personal information. Also, when you're having problems with reports, please include the name of the report and the parameters you use it to run the report. And finally, try to review the knowledge base articles before submitting a ticket. If you have a common error, you're having a common error, more than likely there's an article about that already in a knowledge base. And even if the issue is not that common, we always try to have the articles as comprehensive as possible. Okay, so let's continue with the rest of the responsibilities. You're also in charge of privacy and confidentiality of your data. So you should monitor the compliance with the standards of confidentiality described in the HMIS policies and procedures. This also includes a standard for collection, entry, and retrieval of data. Also, you should inform your users that if there's any security violations, they should report them to you as soon as possible, and then you should escalate those violations to us. And the last responsibility I want to talk about is the agency audit process, which they're happening right now. So some of you already have that happening. You know that this year the process is 100% virtual. So now your responsibilities are a little bit different than the years prior. So first, you should complete and you should submit the agency audit form, as well as the agency agreement and the data sharing agreement forms. You should also conduct security check-ins to all the computers and devices that are used in your agency to access HMIS, so you can verify that they meet the technical standards that are required. And of course, the most important responsibility is to attend the audit. So thank you to those of you who have gone through the process already. I actually miss, as I said before, I miss seeing you guys, but I think the process has gone smoothly so far. And as a reminder, once your audit has been completed, please provide feedback to us. We'd really appreciate to hear from you. Okay, so let's talk about my favorite part, which is data quality. So one of the most important responsibilities as agency administrator is monitoring data quality of your agency. So we're gonna take a deep dive into this topic. So what exactly is data quality? Data quality is a term that refers to how reliable and how comprehensive is the data of our system. And this could be a kind of broad concept, but fortunately we can break this down into 4 main components. So the components under data quality are timeliness, completeness, accuracy, and consistency. So this means that we have good data quality in our system when the data that we collect from our clients is complete, it's up to date in HMIS, and reflects the real information of the clients in a consistent manner. So we need to have like the whole package. It's like the combination of all of these conditions in order to have good data quality. So let's take a look at each one of the components. Okay, so first we have timeliness. So what exactly is timeliness? According to HUD, data timeliness refers to the degree to which the data is collected in HMIS and available when it's needed. So data timeliness looks at how much time it passed from a moment that you collect the client's information to the moment that you enter the data in HMIS. And why is it important? So it's important to enter data in a timely manner because we need to make sure that the information in HMIS reflects the most current information of the clients we serve. So we need to have that guaranteed in our system. And how do we achieve data timeliness? So up-to-date information can only be achieved when the client's data that is entered in HMIS as soon as it is collected. Okay, and perhaps the most important question is, how do we review data timeliness in our system? So we understand that it's not always possible to enter data as soon as it's collected, but it's important to remember that it's expected for all users to enter data in HMIS within 3 days of collecting it. So that's the threshold that we have in our system. And that applies for entry information, for assessments, for services, and also for exit. So it's all data across the whole system. And what are the tools that we have in our system to review data timeliness right now. So as we have said before, we recommend to run the data timeliness reports that we have made available for you a couple of months. And I think we talked about this in the August user meeting. We have a details and a summary version of this report. So in the details, we are looking at how long does it take to enter data in HMIS on a client level. And in the summary report, we look at the number of clients in a specific data timeliness interval. So let me show you an example of the timeliness reports. Let's see the project start data timeliness that what we have here. This report, in this report, we're comparing the project start date with the date that the enrollment was created in HMIS. So we're basically subtracting those dates to get the number of days it took to create the enrollment. And those are the numbers that you see here circled in orange. And as I said, this is a client level report because we can see it for each one of the members enrolled in our projects. Okay. And let's take a look at the summary report. So we're still looking at the number of days it takes to record data in HMIS. So the concept is the same as the details, but here we're grouping the clients in interval of days. So the columns that you see here in this report show the number of clients under each interval. So for example, if we see here the Springfield Homeless Shelter that we have circled in the report, we can see that there are 7 clients whose data took more than 30 days to be entered in HMIS. So this is like a warning sign for us, and it's something that we should pay attention. We also have these reports for services and exit information, but the format is the same. Okay, so what can we do after running these reports? That's the most important takeaway here. There's not much to correct in terms of timeliness because these reports just show us the timeliness of the data that we already entered, right? So we cannot change the past. But these reports are very useful to identify where are the delays in our data. So in other words, to identify in which part of the data process we are having more delays. So is it services or exits or entries or where exactly we can have that information from running these reports. And this will help us setting up strategies to improve when we really need it, right, as an agency. And it's up to you as the agency administrator to run these reports monthly and to measure the progress that you have over time. So that's the most important recommendation because ultimately you are in charge of monitoring this process. And you are also responsible to think about what are the strategies that you can implement to have timely data in your agency. Okay, so now let's take a look at completeness. What is completeness? So according to HUB, data completeness refers to the degree to which all required data is known and is documented in HMIS. So this is looking if there's a valid response to all the data elements required for a client. So remember that a valid response exclude data not collected, client doesn't know, a client refused. So those are not considered valid responses. And why is it important? Why is completeness important? Completeness ensures that the data entered in HMIS truly represents the population that we serve in our product. So if we have any missing data, any missing information, we're gonna have like a gap that is ultimately impede us from characterizing our clients and analyzing the data. So that's why we need to have understanding of all the information. And how do we achieve completeness? So we do it by having all the data, collecting all the data elements that are required for a client, just having answers complete. And how do we review completeness in our system? Okay, so the first thing to consider here, and which is very important, is that we have some thresholds in our community for completeness of our data. So these thresholds depend on the project type and also the data element type, as you can see here in this chart. By data element type, I mean if the question is related to the universal data elements or the program-specific data elements at entry or the program-specific data elements at exit. So we have those 3 project data element types. And notice that street outreach and services only projects have lower thresholds than the rest of the project types. And also exit data has lower threshold than the rest of the data element types. So it's important to consider that this is specified by each project type and also what type of responses we are considering. Okay, so what are the tools that we have to use? We have in our system to assess completeness in our data. So some of you might already have established your own processes for reviewing completeness. So you might run specific reports, or you have other procedures, and that works best for your agency, obviously, and that is great. But in addition to your own process, we recommend to run the data completeness reports that we have made available about a month ago or so. These are client level reports that show the client's responses to all the HUD data elements. And we have 3 reports, 1 for each data element type, as you can see here in the screenshot. Okay, so let's see an example of these reports real quick. Here we have the universal data elements completeness report. So we're looking at the client's responses to the questions that are only related to the universal data elements, right? And if we look closer, right, in the report, we can identify our missing data, which this can be an actual blank, as we see here, or data not collected. So we can identify we can also identify the responses that have client doesn't know or client refuse, which they're also considered completeness issues, as you know. Okay, one thing about these reports is it's important to consider that not everybody needs to answer all the questions, right? So we need to see this chart in order to identify which are the clients that need to answer each specific question, because otherwise we might think that we have an error when in reality we don't, because a blank is not always a missing response. So I would recommend to check this table when you are reviewing the reports. Okay, so to wrap up completeness, what can we do after running these reports? What should you do as agency administrator? So first, you need to identify the missing information. As I said, this can be either blanks or data not collected. You need to identify client doesn't know and client refuse responses. And most importantly, you should complete data when it's possible. So in this case, we actually can make corrections, unlike timeliness. Okay, so now let's talk about accuracy. What is accuracy exactly? So data accuracy refers to the degree to which data entered in HMIS reflects the real information of the clients we serve. And why is it important? So having accurate data is really important because it guarantees that the information in our system is reliable and also valid. And most importantly, how do we achieve accuracy in our system? So we need clients to provide real information, and we also need intake staff to first document this information correctly, and second, review that the data that the clients are giving us is congruent and valid. And I think, in my opinion, accuracy is the most complex of the components of data quality, and this is because it's not that easy or straightforward to assess. So I think in order to review it, it's useful if we can separate this concept into parts, like think of them like 2 different subcomponents, if you will. So on the one hand, we need to verify that the information we enter in HMIS is congruent with the HUD data standards. So in other words, we need to verify that the information is logical and makes sense according to HUD. So examples of data that is not congruent would include a household without a head of household, or an invalid social security number, or incoherence in the disabling condition data element. And as well, when we have any typos with dates, such as like the date of birth being after the project entry date, or the project exit date being prior to the project entry date. So things like that, things that don't make sense, but we can identify. Okay, and on the other hand, which I think it's more difficult to identify is we need to see that the information that the clients are giving us is real, so that the information that they provide reflects the real situation. And also we need to verify that the data that we enter in HMIS matches what the client has reported. Okay. So as I said, accuracy is not that easy to measure, but we have one tool in HMIS that might be helpful, which is the monthly dashboard. You guys are already familiar with this dashboard. I know there are some of you run it like very often, but we recommended to run it to review that the data that was entered by your agency in the last month reflects the real situation, the real information of the clients that you serve. So this is something that you should do it multiple times a month or at least once a month, so you can review if the data in HMIS is real. Okay. So besides the dashboard, what else we recommend in terms of accuracy? I would encourage you to establish specific processes and procedures that work for your agency to ensure that the information reflects the real information, that the information reflects the real situation of the clients. And I think it's important that this is very specific to your own agency, so you should do it, you should put in place procedures that work for the operation of your agency. And you know better that than us. But just to give you an example of these specific processes, procedures that we would recommend is, for example, if you have errors in client names or date of births, you could advise your case managers to compare the information that the client provided with an actual document, so we can ensure that the spelling of the names is correct and that the date of birth is correct as well. So just having that level of checking. Another example for those of you who use paper forms, which I know is most of you, is having another person reviewing the data that has been entered in HMIS against the paper form. So pretty much comparing those things, and that would add another layer of review. Okay. Another recommendation I think is very, very important is to emphasize to clients and also to the intake staff that it's preferable to enter client doesn't know or data not collected than to enter inaccurate information. So it's important that we reiterate this to our users. We cannot sacrifice accuracy to have completeness, okay? And my last recommendation is to advise case managers to guide clients throughout the whole intake process, so they really understand the questions and all the response options. Because I think sometimes clients don't provide accurate information because they don't really understand the questions or the response options, not necessarily because they don't know. So yes, those are my recommendations for accuracy. So now let's talk about consistency, which is the last component. What exactly is consistency? So data consistency refers to the degree to which the data is equivalent in the way it is collected and stored among all the agencies that participate in the HMIS. And why is it important? So we need to have the same understanding of the client's information and the way that that information should be collected in HMIS in order to have accurate data. We need consistency to have accuracy. And this is because if we have a different interpretation of the data elements and their response options, we're not going to be able to assess if the data is valid or if the data is truthful. And how do we achieve consistency? So, well, we achieve consistency if we have the same understanding of all the data that we collect. And most importantly, how can we review consistency in our system? So we recommend that all HMIS users review the HMIS cheat sheets. These sheets provide a detailed explanation of the data elements that we collect, and they also have specific recommendations on how to collect the data. So here in the screenshot, you can see all the cheat sheets that we have available for you. So please encourage your users to check them all. I personally really like the profile creation and enrollment cheat sheet. I think this is very useful for case managers and for intake staff because it gives us recommendations on how to ask questions to the client in a way that they can understand the information that they are being asked, so they can provide an answer that truly reflects their situation. This is really important because it's allowed us to have completeness and accuracy at the same time. So we can have both thanks to consistency. Okay. So now I would like to talk about the most common data quality errors, and most importantly, how to fix them and how to avoid them. Okay. Perhaps the most severe data quality error that we could have, or at least in terms of reporting, especially hot reporting, is the relationship to head of household error. So we know that we should have one and only one head of household, right? And this means that A, the household cannot have more than one head of household, and B, there should always be a head of household assigned for each group enrollment. So let's see this with an example. Let's suppose we have the Simpsons family in a group enrollment. If I select Homer and Marge both as a head of household, meaning that I select self here in the relationship to head of household, the system will automatically show me an error sign, and it's not going to let me save my changes. Okay? And let's see the second example. And let's see the same Simpsons enrollment. If I don't have any head of household selected, meaning that nobody has self in the relationship to head of household, the system will also show me an error sign, as you can see here. So we might wonder, if clarity warns me of these errors in both scenarios, how come I have this error and why is it so common? Because it's quite common. When does this error occur? So this mostly happens when a head of household leaves the project while the rest of the members remain enrolled in the same project. So let's see an example again with the Simpsons. Let's suppose I enroll the Simpsons on January 1st of 2017, and I assign Homer as the head of house. But then I exited Homer of January 1st of this year, as you can see here, circled in red, but the rest of the Simpsons are still active in the project. So after Homer leaves, the Simpsons don't have any head of household assigned anymore. And if I were going to run a report from January 1st to now, I will get an accuracy error because the Simpsons don't have a head of household assigned for that specific period of time. So this is violating the rule that there should always be a head of household assigned at any given time. And for this reason, we have an accuracy error. Okay, so how do we fix the error, which is the most important part? As soon as Homer leaves the household, I need to first designate a new head of household. So I should have as designated Marge as the new head of household. And second, I need to correct the other members' relationship to head of household to reflect their new relationship to Marge, to the newly designated head of household. So in this case, I don't need to change the relationship of Lisa or Bart because they have the same relationship to the head of household. They are the head of household child. But I will need to change Homer's relationship to head of household from self to head of household spouse because he's no longer the head of household. And this change would be retroactively. Okay, so that's how we fix this error, but I think it's more important to learn how to prevent it. So I would recommend to remind your users that every single time that a head of household leaves the project alone, meaning that the rest of the members remain enrolled, we always need to reassign a new head of household and adjust the other relationship to head of households accordingly. Okay. So another very common and severe error is related with the disabling condition. And this happens when there's an incoherence between the disabling condition and the specific disabilities. So we know that a client is considered to have a disabling condition if A, the client has a specific disability that is expected to be long-term and impair their ability to live independently, or B, if the client has a developmental disability or HIV/AIDS. So let's see the first example. If any of these follow-up questions or of these disabilities is yes, then the disabling condition should be yes as well. But since I have no here, I would have an error. because I will have an inconsistency, specifically an accuracy error, because I have data, but the data is not according to the hot data standards. Okay, let's see the other example. If a client has a developmental disability or HMIS, so if I have yes for either of these disabilities, then the client is also considered to have a disabling condition. And since I have no here for disabling condition, then I would also have an accuracy error. So those are the two scenarios in which I can get this error. And note that I did not receive a warning from the system in either case. So it's up to us up to us as the users to identify the errors and make the corrections. So in this sense, you should encourage your users to review the coherence between the disabling condition and the specific disabilities when they are first collecting the information from the client. So I think it's easier to do it as we review and enter the data as opposed to correcting the data after. Okay. And the last severe error I wanted to show you is a completeness error in the date of birth data element. When we select data not collected for date of birth, there's no way for us to know the client's age. And this is a pretty big deal because without an age, we cannot determine a household type. And that is very severe in terms of HUD reporting, especially the LSA and the HCMP. So what can we do about this? So if the client doesn't know or refuses to give you the date of birth, I would just recommend to have the client estimate their age. And then you can enter January 1st as an estimated year, and then select approximate date of birth reported. So in that way, we still have an age, and we're able to determine the household type. Okay, so there are other data elements that are pretty sensitive to errors as well, meaning that they can have significant negative effect in data quality and performance. And examples of these would be project start date, project exit date, destinations, and the living situation questions. But I think for most of these errors are completeness. There are completeness errors, so they are more intuitive to fix. Okay. So now let's talk about the data quality report cards. So the data quality report cards allows us to assess the data quality of our whole system as a whole. So this is the publication that we make after you guys have all your the processes and procedures to review and monitor your data quality. So for the publication of report cards, we have three main steps. First, we send the agency administrators data quality corrections. Second, the agency administrator completes the corrections in HMIS. And third, we publish the data quality report cards. And we repeat this process every quarter. So on paper, we can see here the schedule of the process in this chart. Notice that the process takes about 1 month because we send the correction after the quarter is over at the beginning of the month. Then you would complete corrections by the middle of the month. You would have about 2 weeks. And finally, we would publish report cards 2 weeks after the end of the month. So as we all know, we haven't been able to publish report cards these years because of COVID, and that's why we wanted to provide additional tools that you can use to monitor your data quality. Okay, but even if we haven't been able to publish report cards in a while, I still wanted to show you like the process a little bit more. So as I mentioned, the first step is that we send you corrections. And we do this by sending you this colorful data quality correction spreadsheet that we see here. I know most of you might be familiar already with this spreadsheet, but if you're not, like, I introduce you to the data quality correction spreadsheet. And this spreadsheet is highlighting data completeness and also data accuracy errors. So in green, we highlight missing responses. In yellow, we highlight client doesn't know and client refuse, that, as you know, they're also considered completeness error. And in purple, we have accuracy issues, like, for example, like the problems we saw with the disabling condition or with the head of house. Okay, so what is the idea after you receive this spreadsheet? The first thing, you need to obviously review it and identify the errors that can be corrected. So we understand that you cannot correct everything, like for example, client refused or client doesn't know, but as an agency administrator, you should acknowledge those responses. Also, it's important to realize the severity of the issues. So as I said, things highlighted in purple are accuracy issues, and in that sense, they constitute incoherences in the data. So they absolutely should be corrected, specifically if there are severe errors like head of household or disabling condition. And finally, the last step is to make the appropriate corrections in the client's enrollment in HMIS. And one last thing about this, for your correction process, you can check the corrections reference guide to see kind of a detailed list of all the possible errors that you can see in that spreadsheet. Okay, and the third and last step for the publication of report is the publication of report cards. So the first step of the report cards assesses the completeness and the accuracy of the universal data element. So for each universal data element, we're calculating the percentage of missing responses, including blanks as well, responses with client is no and data not collected, and responses that constitute accuracy issues. So basically the same things that we are seeing highlighted in the corrections spreadsheet. And then we're looking at this for each project at our system. But we are also looking at data quality for all the projects combined. So for example, we see here that 24% of the destination questions for the last quarter were data not collected for all our projects. We also have an average data quality score that you see here, which is an indicator of the valid responses for each project. So this is looking at everything that is like highlight, that is green, like light green, which are the percentage of valid responses. As I was saying, you can see this percentage for each project or for all the projects combined. You just need to select your project here in the project dropdown. And the second tab of the report cards looks at timeliness. So this shows the average number of days it takes to enter project start, services, and exit data in HMIS. And we can see here, you also can see this information for the whole system or for each project of your agency. So for example, we can see that the timeliness for exit was 11 days last quarter for all the projects combined. And remember that our threshold is 3 days. So this should be like a warning sign from all of us. And what's important here is that it allows us to identify the areas in which we need to work on. Okay, so to wrap up, what are the takeaways of this training about data quality? I just want to reiterate, like, you are like the manager and the steward of data quality for your agency. So it's up to you to set up specific procedures and processes for reviewing data quality that addresses all the components that we talked about today. And for this, you can also use the tools that we reviewed, such as the completeness report, the timeliness report, the monthly dashboard, the consistency cheat sheets, and taking into consideration the recommendations we gave about accuracy and also consistency. Also, it's important for you guys to spread the word about the importance of data quality with your whole agency. So talk about data quality more often with all your users, and start talking about data quality with your new users from the very beginning when they first start at your agency. And finally, think of data quality as a best practice for the whole process of entering data, not just when we're doing corrections, because I think it's better to learn how to avoid making the errors than to fix the errors later. And yes, that would be my takeaways. Do you guys have any questions? Yes, of course. This one, right? Date of birth completeness. Yes. This is the yes. Is there anything you want to know more about this slide? Yes, Armando is asking me if I can share more, if I can share the data for completeness. Okay, of course, you're very welcome. Is there any other question? And I just want to reiterate, these are just recommendations that we have. I think it's your responsibility to establish your own process. As I said, you know your agencies better, your process better, but the moral of the story is pretty much have data quality as your new best friend and think of data quality throughout the whole process of entering your data. Okay, so I will leave a few minutes in case somebody else has another question. But if not, thank you very much for joining us today. If you have any questions about this topic, just again send us in the chat box or also contact us in the help desk. I will send a wrap-up email with the links to the resources and all the materials we discussed today. And also I would like to send you a survey, the link for the survey. Could you please complete this survey and let us know your thoughts about the training? We really appreciate your thoughts and all the feedback that you can provide. Thank you again for your time. Yes, absolutely, Angie. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, of course. And if you think of anything else that would be helpful for us to demonstrate about data quality in the future, please let us know as well. And yes, just please share this with your users. We would really appreciate that. Thank you guys. Thank you so much for your time and have a great day.